You're listening to Audiology. Support this channel by becoming a member and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. After encountering setbacks in their military efforts in the northern United States early in the American Revolutionary War, the British military strategists shifted their focus toward a southern campaign, aiming to win over the southern colonies with the help of local loyalists. Their initial move involved taking control of the key southern ports of Savannah, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina. In December 1778, they successfully captured Savannah, facing only minimal resistance from the local militia and Continental Army forces. There were several reasons behind the British interest in the southern colonies. Unlike other regions, the South tended to have more residents who were sympathetic to the British cause. The British hoped that these sympathies would translate into active support for their military campaign. Furthermore, they made promises of freedom to enslaved African Americans who joined their fight, winning additional support. From an economic perspective, controlling the South was also attractive due to its profitable crops like rice, indigo, and tobacco, which were vital for the revolutionaries' procurement of military supplies from Europe. While scouting the coast, British generals observed the arrival of French ships in Charleston, South Carolina, but General Augustin Prevost mistakenly reported that these ships had left the area. He was unaware that these were the advance ships of a fleet sent by French General d'Estaing, indicating the arrival of French forces in Georgia, a critical intelligence oversight that left the British unprepared for a French engagement. With the bulk of British forces positioned away from Georgia in Beaufort and Sunbury, their defensive stance in Georgia was weakened. In response to these developments, the Continental Army, numbering between 5,000 and 7,000 troops by June 1779, fortified Charleston under the command of General Benjamin Lincoln. Recognizing the necessity of naval support to retake Savannah, Lincoln sought assistance from the French, who had allied with the American cause in 1778. French Admiral the Comte d'Estaing, after engaging in a strategic standoff with a British fleet in the Caribbean, seized Grenada in July before heeding the American calls for support against Savannah. Early in September, defying the typical risks of hurricane season, French ships reached Charleston to inform the Americans of d'Estaing's approach with a formidable fleet and 4,000 troops. After coordinating with the French envoys, Lincoln embarked with over 2,000 men from Charleston on September 11th, setting the stage for a joint operation against British-held Savannah. In the area, British forces were comprised of approximately 6,500 soldiers stationed in Brunswick, Georgia, another group of 900 led by Colonel John Maitland in Beaufort, South Carolina, and around 100 loyalists in Sunbury, Georgia. These troops were under the command of General Augustin Prevost, who was based in Savannah. Prevost found himself unprepared for the arrival of the French fleet off the coast near Savannah and had to call back his forces from Beaufort and Sunbury to help defend the city. To strengthen the city's defense, Captain Moncrief of the Royal Engineers was tasked with building fortifications. To accomplish this, he utilized between 500 and 800 African-American slaves who worked up to 12 hours a day. They constructed a fortified line with redoubts that stretched nearly 1,200 feet, about 370 meters, on the plains outside Savannah. As for British naval support, it included two older frigates, the HMS Foley and HMS Rose. These ships contributed by landing their guns and most of their crew to assist the troops on land. The British also brought in the armed brig HMS Keppel, launched in 1778, and the armed ship Germain, which was part of the East Florida Navy. Additionally, there were two galleys, named Comet and Thunder, also from East Florida. To further bolster their strength, the British fitted out two merchant vessels, the Savannah and Venus, with arms. Starting on September 12th, d'Estaing landed his troops outside the city and began advancing by September 16th. Feeling certain of winning and thinking that Maitland's backup forces wouldn't make it to Savannah because of Lincoln's actions, he presented Prevost with a chance to surrender. Prevost asked for a 24-hour truce, buying some time. Due to some confusion about who was supposed to stop Maitland, the water routes between Hilton Head Island in South Carolina and the mainland were left open. This slip-up allowed Maitland to join Savannah just before the truce concluded. Prevost then politely turned down d'Estaing's surrender offer, even as Lincoln's forces arrived. On September 19th, as Charles-Marie de Trollong du Roumain and his squadron advanced up the river, they engaged in a battle with Comet, Thunder, Savannah, and Venus. The following day, the British sank the leaking Rose below the town to block the French ships and set Savannah and Venus on fire. By sinking Rose in a strategic spot, they effectively stopped the French fleet from aiding the American attack. Germain was tasked with defending the northern side of Savannah. Comet and Thunder were assigned to counter any bombardment attempts from South Carolinian galleys. Over several days, British shore batteries and these ships fought against 2 South Carolinian galleys, significantly damaging Revenge in one encounter. Dismissing an immediate attack on the British defences, the French commander opted to unload cannons from his ships to bombard the city from October 3rd to 8th. This attack left the city severely damaged, with a British observer noting that almost no house was left unscarred. However, when this strategy didn't bring the results D'Estaing hoped for, he reconsidered. Driven by the urgent need to conclude the operation due to rising health issues among his crew and depleting supplies, he decided to go for an assault. Although a traditional siege might have eventually worked, D'Estaing felt he couldn't afford the delay. In defiance of warnings from many of his officers, Admiral D'Estaing made the daring decision to attack the British forces on the morning of October 9th. This operation's success partly hinged on keeping certain tactics under wraps, but these were leaked to General Prevost well ahead of the planned start time at 4 o'clock in the morning. A thick fog threw the Allied forces off course as they made their move towards the Spring Hill redoubt, leading them into swamps, and by the time they regrouped and launched the assault, it was nearly daylight. D'Estaing had targeted the redoubt on the British right flank, mistakenly believing it was only defended by militia. To his surprise, it was actually manned by both local militia and the staunch Scots of John Maitland's 71st Regiment, or Fraser's Highlanders, celebrated for their bravery at Stono Ferry. The attackers, especially conspicuous in their white uniforms, became easy targets for the skilled riflemen among the militia. In the thick of battle, Admiral D'Estaing was injured twice, and the notable Polish cavalry officer Casimir Pulaski, fighting alongside the American forces, sustained fatal injuries. The initial attack wave fell into chaos upon reaching the redoubt, the trenches below choked with casualties. Meanwhile, feint attacks on other British positions failed to gain any ground. The charge of the Second Assault Column was led by Swedish Count Kurt von Stedink, who, despite the overwhelming might of the British, managed to plant the American flag on the last trench before an intense counterattack forced them back, leaving him with just 20 injured men, himself included. Reflecting on these harrowing moments, he wrote of the profound sorrow he felt during their retreat, haunted by the cries of their fallen comrades. Following an hour of brutal fighting, D'Estaing had no choice but to call for a retreat. By October 17th, both he and General Lincoln saw no option but to lift the siege, marking the end of a valiant but ultimately unsuccessful endeavour against the British stronghold. The battle we're talking about was among the most brutal in the entire war. Although Prevost, a key figure at the time, estimated that the Franco-American forces suffered between 1,000 to 1,200 losses, the real numbers were stark, but somewhat lower: 244 killed, nearly 600 wounded, and 120 captured. On the other side, British losses were noticeably fewer: 40 killed, 63 wounded, and 52 went missing. Sir Henry Clinton was so impressed by the outcome that he called it the greatest event that has happened the whole war, and even in London, they celebrated with cannon fire when they got the news. The Siege of Savannah is remembered as a significant British triumph. That's likely why Charles Dickens decided it was the perfect backdrop for a dramatic moment in his novel Barnaby Rudge, where he had his character Joe Willett suffer a serious injury, losing an arm. Adding to the historical significance, 3 Army National Guard units that are around today, the 118th Field Artillery, the 131st Military Police, and the 263rd Air Defense Artillery, are direct descendants of American units that fought in the Siege of Savannah. It's worth noting that there are only 30 active U.S. Army units whose histories trace back to the colonial era, making these 3 particularly special for their historical connections. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.